Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, John Hubbard, director here at Boomer Consulting, and with me today is Amanda Wilkie. Hi, Amanda.
Hey, John.
Amanda is a consultant here at Boomer, and you focus in two big areas. That is in the area of technology and process. So just to give the listeners a little context, Amanda, would you mind sharing a little bit of how you help firms here at Boomer Consulting and even some of your experience prior to joining Boomer Consulting?
Absolutely, John. So after spending about 13 years working in technology and public accounting firms, and through different moves and mergers, I was in 4 different firms in the top 50, including being CIO of a top 30 firm. I joined Boomer with that technology focus, but we quickly learned that we were having a lot of conversations about technology that ended up being really conversations about process and vice versa. So the team internally, we've got together, and the last 3 years have really got to focus on that intersection of technology and process, because those two things are so interrelated. I mean, you can't really look at process without talking about technology, and anytime you're looking at new technology, especially emerging technology, you have to look at how it's going to change your processes. So I spend a lot of my time working with firms, helping them build a technology strategy, sometimes helping them with process improvement using the Lean Six Sigma framework. Sometimes we pair those things together. And I also work with our circles. I help facilitate our CIO circle, our Lean circle that focuses on process improvement, and then our Boomer technology circles as well.
Awesome. So you definitely have your hands full every week here at Boomer, helping firms in a lot of different areas. And it's really interesting to see the convergence of the processes and the technology, and that's becoming harder and harder to kind of unwind or pull apart. So that's really critical to firm success. So related to the technology piece, right? All of us have been hearing about blockchain, and how firms are approaching that topic can be widely different from another. So, I've heard you speak on this a lot, and you're really, really committed to preaching to firms to be educated on, blockchain, and to stay focused and attentive to as kind of this blockchain technology, develop. So my first question for you is, why is it important? Why should firms care about being educated on blockchain?
Yeah. Well, John, I almost interrupted you in your intro when you said about 20 minutes, because I think not only could I talk for more than 20 minutes on blockchain, we're probably going to need more than 20 minutes to really dive into blockchain and unravel these layers. But I will say, just like you did, technology and process being so ingrained and intertwined together as these emerging technologies, and we're going to talk about blockchain, but any emerging technology, as it really starts, getting some roots and really start making an impact, we have to look at not just the technology and the process there together. And you ask, so why is it important for firms to be educated on blockchain right now? And you're right, I've been talking about blockchain for many years now. And some of us are still looking at it like, when is blockchain going to show up? But I really think we have to separate the two topics. I think we have to separate cryptocurrency from the technology of blockchain. And I feel like blockchain itself and crypto hit the scene, 2008 with Bitcoin and all of that. And then there was the crypto craze in late 2017, and Bitcoin was almost, $20,000 a coin. And then there was a bubble. And around that time, in 2016 through 2018, especially in some of the, and really all of the firms throughout the profession, blockchain was like the big buzzword. But when crypto kind of hit that bubble, the talk about blockchain kind of went away. A lot of firms kind of hoped that they dodged that bullet. They weren't going to have to worry about crypto or worry about blockchain, and that's simply not the case. You know, now in 2020, if you thought that you were putting blockchain aside, now is the time to really pick it back up, because many firms, especially big and mid-sized firms, they've been investing in education around blockchain. They've been investing in building blockchain service lines, whether it is advisory or consulting, or even crypto accounting, auditing these systems, things like that. So now in 2020 is, again, kind of that time to pick it back up. And I'll expand on that a little bit more. Again, separating crypto from the blockchain technology. Looking at crypto, the IRS, I mean, John, you pay taxes, right?
Sometimes. Yes.
Yes. I hope so. I hope so. You pay taxes. So, you know, the IRS does require tax filers to declare whether or not they have received, sold, exchanged, acquired any type of cryptocurrencies. Well, this year, that question about cryptocurrencies is going to be the first question on the 1040. So you should be prepared to answer that question, John. Taxpayers should be prepared to answer that question, but tax preparers should understand what that question really means and how it's going to impact their clients and those taxpayers. Also sticking with crypto, the concept of stable coins is becoming more and more popular. So a stable coin is a cryptocurrency that is simply designed to minimize that volatility of cryptocurrencies. And a stable coin does that by being pegged by either fiat or other cryptos, or some sort of exchange traded commodity, something like that. So one that kind of might ring a bell is Facebook's Libra, and that's been in the news in the past, and it would be actually backed by a whole basket of assets. And right now, Facebook still has its hands full with you know, lots of the regulatory hoops that it's going to have to jump through to make Libra a thing. But John, just imagine if Facebook Libra can put cryptocurrency in the hands of the 2.7 billion Facebook users all over the world. You know, they're not necessarily going to know what to do with it as far as a cryptocurrency, but we need to understand, we, the accounting profession, need to understand what to do with it. So again, we kind of went from, hey, there's this crypto craze where everything's very volatile, to now here is a new type of cryptocurrency, a stable coin that actually minimizes that volatility. So these are actually becoming, you know, more and more viable, a more viable option for currency, which can be interesting. And then the third, again, sticking with the cryptocurrency asset or aspect, is the concept of a central bank digital currency, or you'll start hearing that as a CBDC. And it's inspired by crypto, but you know, central is right there in the name of central bank digital currency. So it's centrally controlled. So it doesn't technically need blockchain, but it could replace fiat currency. It could abolish the need for paper money. And when we started, you know, in 2020, when COVID hit and everyone was talking about cash and no one has change and things like that, no one wants to touch money, does it make sense to have a digital currency? You know, that could be on the roadmap. In fact, right now, China is currently testing, they have a CBDC called they have the digital currency electronic payment system that they're testing out in, I think, 4 major cities in China. So we are, you know, if we thought we missed the whole cryptocurrency craze, we haven't. It's coming back around, and there are some, you know, some advancements in these areas that we really need to be paying attention to as a profession. So that's the cryptocurrency aspect, John. If we look at the technology standpoint, COVID is really being looked at as, the great technological leap. I've heard our colleague Mark Stout refer to it as the great leap. I've heard some other articles refer to it as the great leap. And it truly is. I mean, we found a lot of breakdowns in processes. And you may remember, back in Q1, Q2 of 2020, there were these awful stories of like dairy farmers in, the
Right.
Northeast, and they couldn't sell their products. So they're just pouring milk out all over the place. There was a story I read about a potato farmer that couldn't sell his potatoes. He had tons of potatoes sitting in a field and rotting, and actually put it out on social media, and people came and just started loading cars full of potatoes. Well, they couldn't sell their product, not because there wasn't a demand, but because we have made our supply chain so incredibly efficient that they couldn't react fast enough. They couldn't be agile. The potato farmer said, he couldn't retool fast enough to go from selling potatoes to restaurants to selling them to grocery stores. He also didn't have those relationships, and he didn't have those certifications to sell to those organizations. So if you can take blockchain and you can put that information and make it publicly accessible or more readily accessible to the people who need it, you'll be able to adjust more quickly to changes in the market like this. I should back up and say, 2017, 2018, we were talking about blockchain and supply chain to actually track products. So being able to track, lettuce if there is an E. coli breakout, being able to pinpoint exactly where that lettuce came from. And that's a great, great use case. But again, fast forward to 2020, and we're taking that great technological leap thanks to COVID, there's even more opportunity to use blockchain in areas like supply chain. So I'm going to pause there for a second, John. I know I'm talking quickly. You said I only had 20 minutes.
No, that's great. And yeah, there's so much more information you have related to this, but I think you hit on some real key reasons why it's important firms start to pay attention to this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not only for themselves and for being able to serve their clients better, but there's probably opportunities as well for new services to evolve from that, firms can create and deliver. So getting back to the education piece. So, you help firms understand blockchain and, do the trainings and, all that good stuff. What resources would you have for them, or would you recommend they read or watch or pay attention to so they can stay,
Yep.
updated on this?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of resources out there, and it can be sometimes confusing because there are so many resources out there. But there's also the challenge of change. I mean, the technology is changing very, very rapidly. There are a ton of regulatory challenges as well because the technology is changing, and very little actual authoritative guidance out there. So it can be really hard to find some of those resources. I'll just give myself a shameless plug. You see a lot of things that I post on social media. So if people want to follow me on Twitter or connect with me on LinkedIn, I repost a lot of the resources that I find. So I'm happy to feed people information through those avenues. I love having this conversation. So anyone who wants to have a conversation with me, I'm happy to do so. But there are some great resources out there in the profession on blockchain and crypto. The AICPA has done a great job. They've built some training. They've built some practice aids. that you can find, through the AICPA. They've also partnered with the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance, and that's a phenomenal organization. Boomer is a member of the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance, or the WSBA, and we're very active in the WSBA. They have a great accounting working group. That accounting working group is chaired by Dr. Sean Stein-Smith from Lehman College. And again, it's very, very active. There's a lot of resources, a lot of members. There are firms that are members. There are solution providers that are members. We've worked on things. The accounting working group has worked on things like there's a primer for stable coins, if you're interested in learning more about those. There are resources and responses to the IRS and the IRS FAQs on cryptocurrencies. There are resources from other working groups like the legal working groups, and they have some responses to information from the SEC and things like that. So I would say the AICPA, the WSBA, Boomer, were all great resources for things in this area. And in fact, just I think it was last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, the WSBA and Wall Street Blockchain Alliance had its 4th annual Blockchain and Accountancy Symposium. And John, that was a great time. I think there was probably maybe 65, 70 thought leaders that attended that. And typically we would be in New York at the AICPA headquarters. This time it was remote. So I missed seeing everyone, but it was phenomenal content. We reviewed the things that the AICPA was doing in this area. We got updates, some regulatory updates. We had some use case panels on healthcare and identity, on payments. I sat on the one on supply chain. So I talked about the dairy farmers and the potato farmer example. And I love that the WSBA and the AICPA are bringing these thought leaders together, because it wasn't just to inform us, but it was to get our feedback as well on what we're seeing in the profession. Because they both know, WSBA and the AICPA know that this is making an impact. It's making an impact now, even if you're in a firm that doesn't necessarily see that impact yet. So I would say those are some great resources for folks who really want to learn more about blockchain and cryptocurrencies.
That's great. And you also already touched on the fact of how this is affecting other professions, right? You spend a lot of your time within the accounting profession, and through reading and being involved in the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance and some other groups, you really see what's going on outside the profession as it relates to blockchain. Any other examples you want to share, or any other ways you think are important to the accounting profession that is actually, an example of how blockchain is affecting other industries?
Yeah, and I can't think of an industry out there that is not going to be impacted by blockchain. Using just the supply chain example itself, every industry is part of the supply chain. Even professional services, we are a consumer of supply chain, but every, agriculture, logistics, every industry out there is part of supply chain. So every industry is going to be impacted. And actually, that's what I've been saying for the last few years, is even if you don't feel like it's impacting your firm, it's impacting your clients, and it may impact your clients before it ever impacts you and your firm, which is why you need to understand what's happening there and what's happening in those other industries. One that really comes to mind that I'm extremely passionate about, John, is blockchain and identity. And so I'll give you an example. We've started hearing about maybe the concept of things like health IDs. So, John, maybe you want to travel internationally, and you can't do that without a COVID test. Well, having a digital health ID that lives on your phone that is, certifies your identification, but certifies your health background, your vaccinations, all of those things, and having it readily available, again, on a blockchain where it's immutable, so it can't be, it can't be changed once it's out there, that can make a big difference. That could mean that you have access, to that information when you need it, when you want it, and it's protected and it's immutable. That is one area. I think identity has huge opportunities for, an immutable data source like blockchain. So that's going to be a really, really big one. But there's tons. I don't think there's an industry out there that is not going to be impacted by blockchain.
Right. So most accounting firms, their clients will be affected by this for sure.
Absolutely. And another thing to consider is how their clients might be affected, and then how that plays into the accounting process. Mm-hmm. So if the transactions that get recorded on a blockchain are immutable, they can't be changed. So you know that when something is recorded out there, it really happened. You can trust that transaction. Well, then we're no longer really auditing or looking at the transactions that are coming out of those systems, because we trust what's coming out of those systems. What we have to focus on then is how that information got into those systems. What happened to that data before it actually got recorded to the blockchain? So it changes our focus a little bit from what's coming out of the systems to what's going into the system. So there's a lot. There's a lot of technology out there, a lot of blockchain technology, and it is going to change not only the process that your clients are using, but the process that you're going to be using to service those clients as well.
Nice. No, that makes a lot of sense. All right, one last question for you. So We've talked about the why, we've talked about some resources that firms need to be aware of and probably start investing in. We talked about how blockchain is affecting other professions outside of the accounting profession, which falls into being the clients of accounting firms. So with our viewers and listeners here, let's say they're pumped up now about blockchain. What's your recommended next step? If the listeners only did one thing after listening to this episode, what would you recommend they do?
Yeah, I would say we've got to start doing our research. And John, maybe one thing we can do is put some links when we post this. Maybe we can put some links to some of those resources that I talked about, the WSBA, some things from the AICPA. And then I would recommend they actually download those and they start getting excited, start educating themselves. And then if they want to have a conversation, reach out to us. I'd be always happy to talk about blockchain.
Awesome. All right, Amanda. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your week to be on this episode of the Boomer Briefing. For those listeners, thanks for tuning in and stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks.
Thanks, John.